Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Developers End podcast, where we talk about everything in the games industry, but from the eyes of two indie devs. My name is Siavash, and my co-host is Sydney, aka Fam. Today, we are on another episode of the State of the Industry. We're talking about an article that Sydney saw. Yeah, about the fact that the Game Informer magazine is apparently going away as one of the...
Not going away. Gone.
Shutting down. Oh, it's gone.
Dead.
It's done.
Gone.
Okay. It has died.
Yeah.
So Game Informer was one of the last existing sort of physical magazines for the games industry that was still publishing, and now it's dead. I do wonder if we have anyone in the audience that is young enough not to know what Game Informer is.
Oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about that as a thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, let's explain. So let's talk about, for the youngins who might not know, let's talk about what a game magazine is.
It's time to feel old. Is it?
Yeah, let's feel old for a minute. And for anybody who does know, let's have some nostalgia moments. So and you can weigh in on this too. How much access did you even have to game magazines?
Well, I grew up in Iran, full context for everyone listening. And so, no, we had our own game magazines. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we had a few that were Iranian, Persian. I'm sorry, that was my clock that I put together, by the way. I made it myself. Yeah.
Deviation, I want to see this.
Oh, damn it. I have to
Did you 3D print it?
No, but it was a kit that I put together. Hang on.
Would you get one of those kids? Interesting.
I have to unplug it, but it's a 7-segment display.
Like one of those.
I put together. Look how clean that is. Yeah.
Buy or something.
Yeah, I soldered all of that myself.
Soldered.
That's the American pronunciation. People laugh at me over here if I say soldered.
You guys say soldered?
Yeah, soldering.
No, that's no.
Yeah,
soldered.
soldered it together. But anyway,
that's cool.
Yeah, we did have. We'll talk about. Maybe on an episode we talk about electronics and hobby stuff like 3D printing and bigger painting.
But for now, game magazines is a child in Iran.
Yeah, so we had our own Persian game magazines, which. Some of them were very good. Some of them turned into magazines, like online magazines, kind of similar to what happened to the English ones.
Yeah.
And a few of them, some of my friends work at. They are working. Yeah, they're one of them is the head of the production in the game side of it, because it's like an electronics online magazine. It's called Zoom It.
That's cool.
Yeah. One of my friends is
really cool.
He works on that, So, but I don't think any of them also have physical media anymore. But yeah, we had the Persian ones. I don't think we had any English ones make their way through, because magazines and stuff like that are stuff that people don't really kind of import, so to speak.
Yeah, and also the heyday of game magazines was the 80s and 90s, and we didn't have the best relationship with you guys in the 80s and 90s. Not saying it's that much better now, but it was much worse back then.
It was certainly turbulent, yeah. And I mean, we even had the cheat books and everything, so it wasn't that much of a different experience.
So,
just
so
localized.
Similarities then. I actually, I don't know if it's because I was a girl, or I didn't have any men around, or maybe I just wasn't encouraged, but I didn't really interact with game magazines. I didn't even really know that they existed until I was probably in my late teens, early 20s.
I feel like gender definitely has a role to play with it, because Lauren, my partner, also had a similar experience.
It's just not something. If I ever saw one, it was because a boy brought it to school. Like, we weren't really encouraged to pursue gaming in that way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think if we had been, I think a lot of us probably would have been really into it. I'm not saying there aren't any girls who did. I'm just saying it was definitely a lot less common for women. So I didn't really have any. I maybe would see them on the newsstands or something, and maybe ask my mom if I could get it, because I thought it looked cool, but it never really related to my experience with video games. So, but the interesting thing about them is that for the longest time, for anybody who doesn't know, game magazines were you know, it was a monthly issue, and it was just kind of all of the news that had happened within games for that month. And, you know, it started with, I mean, they had tech magazines that were just for computers, and then slowly they started putting games into it. And then I think Nintendo was one of the first ones that did like console specific
Nintendo Power
stuff.
and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and is it Famitsu?
Yeah, in Japan
for the NES and stuff in Japan. So it was just about, you know, here's the games that are coming out, here's how to play them, advertisements to get people excited, reviews, cheat codes, walkthroughs, and, you know, for the longest time, if you got stuck in the game, you either had to have the magazine on hand to figure out how to get past it. You could call a hotline where there were people on call to help walk you through the Zelda games and Mario or whatever. Or you had to buy the books. There were like,
or you had a group of friends, or the people,
or you had a group of friends that you played with. Yeah, and so that's, you know, in that way, gaming has always been very community driven.
Absolutely.
I feel like
there is a funny little memory for me is that my friends would come to our house so that my mum could beat certain levels of games for them because she was so good at it. Yeah, it was
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
What is that version of, you know, Looney Tunes, right? What is that other one that is about all the kids?
Tiny Toons.
Tiny Toons had a game on Sega Genesis, and it was difficult, you know? It's very difficult. I played it a month ago on an emulator, and it was still difficult.
Really?
Yeah. So my friends couldn't beat, like, the final levels and stuff, so they would bring their systems to our house, and my mom would beat it for them. Yeah, it was great.
Go mom.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
she was a gamer. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Games have always been super community driven. I mean, look at... Especially, I mean, here's the thing. I'm not going to be one of those guys that says, "Oh, it's not that anymore." It is just the same as it ever was.
It's just a completely different way.
It's just a different, exactly. So it's just the communities are online. We're just connecting through different mediums, but it's still the same as it has ever been. I mean, we had game shows and tournaments for as long as Super Smash Bros. And stuff been around.
You can go even further back and look at arcades.
Arcades, oh my god, yeah.
Place where people hung out and played games together and challenged each other.
Pubs, right? And bars. That's where they were put.
Not for us. We had just the whole buildings that were just arcades.
Well, I'm actually going further back before arcades were even a thing. The first machines to pop up were always put in bars, like the little Pong machines and Pac-Man and stuff.
I guess you're right. I never really thought about it.
Because it replaced pinball machines.
I never really thought about that. Because like for us, we before I started going to arcades, granted I grew up in the 90s, so you know, I'm not saying arcades started then, but we had a burger joint up the road from us. It was within walking distance. It took 3 to 5 minutes to walk to. And it was called Boys Burgers, and they had like 4 arcade machines, and one of them was Crazy Taxi. I'll never forget that. Oh my god! So that was absolute I would, classic. You know, after school on my way home, I'd stop by Boys Burgers and spend $1 or $2 and play some Crazy Taxi. And then we had another place that I loved called Nickel Nickel, and all of the games, instead of being a quarter, were a nickel. It was 5 cents. And so you could go with $2 and spend an afternoon playing video games. And for that one, it was Time Crisis 3 was the game that I played a lot of. I loved that game. But I mean, you think about, you know, kids on an afternoon would, you know, go spend 3 to 5 hours at the arcade. Mom would drop you off, or you'd walk there if it was close enough, and you'd spend your time there and then go home if you weren't lucky enough to have a console at home. And then once consoles were at home, your friends come over. Like I didn't have, we had an N64 and I had a PlayStation 2, and the consoles I didn't have, my neighbors had. So they had the NES and the Super Nintendo and the Sega, and so we'd go over to their house, and I think they had a GameCube at one point too. And so we'd, you know, what game do we want to play? That's whose house you're going to for the afternoon to play stuff. So
if I share some Middle Eastern memories as well of how things were over there, I think I don't know how it was in North America, but I don't think this has ever been a thing in North America. But I also know that what I'm about to explain is also a thing, or used to also be a thing in South America and in South Asia, in Southeast Asia. But growing up, it's not a thing anymore, really. But growing up, we had these shops, right? They were called clubs for some reason. Nothing to do with like a club. It was a game net, right? But
It was what?
You know what a game net is? Or a game cafe?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but instead of like a bunch of PCs all connected via LAN, it was just a bunch of consoles. So you would go into the shop, there was like 10, 20 TVs all around, people sitting playing, a bunch of people together playing, and like 20 PS1s and PS2s. It didn't really translate after PS2. After that, we all just bought our own consoles and kind of kept it at home. But during the PS1 and PS2 era, these shops were the main places you would go to. You would pay for an hour or 2 or 5. And then you would choose whatever game you want, and then they would just give you a seat, give you a console for that amount of time, and then you would sit and play it. And the best thing was you were around other people, so you would either play with them or they would just like watch you play. And another thing you could do, this is why a lot of people didn't own their own consoles. And if you did own your own console, you were like really rich. I remember the day my dad bought a PS1. It was like crazy. It was like buying a car. It was that crazy. But people would go and what do you call not loan, rent, I guess, a console for the day or for like 2 days because they had guests over. So you would grab a PS1, Crash Team Racing, and then and then you would have to return it at the end of it. So you would just like leave your passport or something behind. You would take the console with you, and then you would bring it back. Yeah, that's how gaming was. And then the game nets after the after PS2, when PS3 came around, a lot of people just bought their own consoles. So they kind of shifted and became what is a lot more kind of commonly in the world used. It exists in North America, which is just the game cafes, which just has a bunch of PCs all connected via LAN. It's really big in Japan and stuff too.
It's huge everywhere except North America.
Oh, really?
And if I had to guess, if I had to take a wild guess here, I'd say it's capitalism. It's better for the gaming companies for everybody to buy their own, than for them to, have them purchased. And so it's kind of the same thing as, we have Barnes and Noble and public libraries aren't as well funded.
That would make sense.
That's if I had to guess, because from a capitalism point of view, that's not great for the game companies, right? Yeah. So I would imagine there's probably some lobby somewhere of them convincing not to give, I don't know, business loans to game cafes or some bullshit.
Or something like, I don't know, you can't show the game in a public settings. It has to be in your own house or something like that.
Yeah. Now, they exist. I've seen a couple. I'm trying to think. It was always military bases where I saw those community come in, in a community setting. The base has a game room or something where you can thanks, Kev, Kev brought me some fruit.
Oh, hell yeah. Nice. Love it.
Where you can go to play games and stuff.
Is that like the families that would stay at a family base, at a military base?
No, it's for the soldiers.
Oh, for the soldiers themselves.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Or I knew a guy. There's actually a guy here that I met. He's I'm not gonna out him or well, I don't know if it'd be outing, but he's the owner or the CEO of a VR gaming studio here in Austin. And I've met him at a couple of events, and he's former military, and he was communications, and it was his job when they got out in the field, wherever they were going, to set up the communications relays and get them access to, whatever. And he was in charge of power and all that stuff. And he would put together gaming bunkers for the guys.
Nice.
So he had convinced them that, you know, all the communications technology needed to be buried underground, and because it needed to be kept cool in the heat and the desert out in the Middle East, and nobody understands communications, so they would just let him do whatever he needed to do, and he would put together these little gaming bunkers for the guys to go and play games and stuff. So I thought that was really cool.
Nice.
But I imagine, yeah, similar stuff. And anyway, I could go on a long tangent, but the point is yeah, that's not really a thing here. And Kevin and I have actually joked about, you know, when we get to retirement age, opening up some kind of a game cafe.
That's really cool.
The other thing that's not common here, that's really common in Asia, is, I'm going to go off on a way tangent here, is manga libraries, basically. And it's a store where you can just go and, you know, check out a manga and sit down and read it, and you're in a little cubicle and they bring you food and stuff. And
that's such a good time.
I think that would, yeah. And I've, you know, doing that with a gaming cafe type setup, and you have really good food, like,
well, here's the thing.
That would work, man. We've got that stuff with board games here is becoming a thing.
Yeah, board game cafes. Yeah. So here's the thing. Growing up, like I said, these clubs were like what you would do in the afternoon after school, and that's where I found so many games that I love to this day. It's just finding them there and playing them for the first time in there. But then, obviously, growing up, they started disappearing, like I said. And then instead of them, they were just like a bit more fancy looking game cafes, and funny enough, board game cafes started dominating in Iran as well before I left. And then when I came to UK, there is a shop in the UK, and we'll probably get into it in a little bit once we go back to the whole magazine thing with GameStop. But GameStop doesn't exist in the UK. Instead, we have another shop just called Game. Right, it's just called Game UK.
Just Game.
Yeah, it's a title. Literally, Google it. It's just the title of it just says Game at the top of the shop.
It's funny.
So, again, I'll get to the fact that they're closed down now, but within the year of me arriving here, they opened the back section of the shop, which was like double the size of the shop, and the back area was the play area. So they had RGB high-end PCs next to each other, and they had a sofa with a TV and a PS5 or PS4 at the time. Yeah, PS4
That's
Pro.
Smart.
And then
GameStop never did that.
Yeah, they had fridges where you could grab yourself a drink or a snack. And I remember Lauren and I used to go to it after college and stuff because
sour strawberry?
We couldn't play together because I only had one TV at home, and we wanted to like play together at the same time. We didn't have proper PCs at the time, so we would just go there, pay for an hour, sit together and play. And I remember we visited during Overwatch's first anniversary.
I bet that was fun.
They had cupcakes with Overwatch logo on top of it and stuff, and they gave it, man, that's such a cool memory for me now. I love doing that. And that was actually the first time I tried a proper good PC, and the reason I went ahead and bought a PC.
You were telling me that game stores have been shutting down.
So that game has shut down. It actually shut down back in 2020. So it was a pretty large store. I don't know what kind of metric to give for it, but it's
because COVID probably killed their.
Yeah, so they closed the play area, and then they closed down the whole shop. And the company that owns Game in the UK also owns another shop called Sports Direct. Think about what is the most popular sports shop in the US that you would go to buy, I don't know, shoes, accessories, sports accessories. Is there another
really
thing? Yeah, so
I would say maybe lids. They sell hats. But primarily, if you're buying any sports memorabilia, you're buying it like at the stadium.
No, it's like equipment, like the shorts and the tops and the shoes.
Okay, I thought you were talking about like
Adidas, Nike,
like supporting a specific team.
No, like
Okay, here we have Academy, Big Five.
Yeah.
Dick's Sporting Goods.
So the equivalent of that in the UK is Sports Direct and another one called JD. So yeah, like I said, they sell like Adidas, Nike, Puma, all of those brands.
Adidas.
Adidas.
It's Adidas.
And so they own Game as well. But yeah, they shut down Game. They replaced the shop that Game was in with a Sports Direct. And they moved, there's another Sports Direct in town, and the Game shop is now a tiny corner in the Sports Direct shop. which is just
What?
depressing. It's just sad.
That doesn't make any sense.
I loved going there. Even if I was just looking
Yeah.
around, they had all sorts of merch. They had all sorts of like peripherals for PC, like keyboards and stuff,
Yeah.
custom keyboards, custom PCs. It was great to visit. And I'm sad to see them gone. Yeah.
I mean, and you've got, and we were kind of talking about this earlier, and something else we kind of want to talk about, which was just the kind of transition globally from physical media to digital media.
Yeah.
And I was saying, it, in my opinion, I don't have any research to prove this or anything, but from my perspective, it started with Apple and iTunes and digital songs.
Yeah.
And I blame Apple for the end of the world.
Well,
but
yeah.
you had them in creating the iPod and really proliferating the idea of MP3 players. I'm not saying they invented the MP3 player, but they
For sure
definitely
not,
made
yeah,
it more
but yeah.
common. And so you have everybody kind of transitioning from let's buy CDs, before that albums or cassette tapes, to buying it per song on iTunes. And then you kind of had more people start kind of drifting over from that physical media to digital media. And if it was, for the longest time, it was just iTunes and you had to pay per song. But then you had the idea of subscription streaming, which is Netflix started that whole thing. And so once you had the subscription streaming for movies, then people realized we could do that for music. So you had Pandora and Spotify, and then they realized we could do it for television, and you've got Stranger Things and Hulu coming around, and
HBO
everybody
Max.
moving, and then HBO Max, and now Disney is one of the big ones, and they're moving
Disney's a
everything
big one.
over. So it's just like everything has kind of transitioned from the having the physical thing to buying the thing digitally to now streaming the thing digitally, where you don't even have access to it unless you're paying a subscription.
Yeah,
And
see,
I
the
think-
ownership is a
And
interesting
now we're
topic.
coming full circle, and people are realizing, well, wait a second, I'm giving you money for this, and I don't even own it. And so we're kind of coming full back around. People are going, no, I want a physical copy of this.
Yeah.
And so especially people who were, our age and a little bit older, my ear keeps itching, I'm sorry, are kind of going, well, wait a second, I want the physical copy of my game. I want the physical copy of this television show that I like so much. I want the physical copy of the album, the CDs. It's funny that, though, we're going back to albums and not CDs.
Yeah.
I've noticed. People are
Well,
liking
like-
the albums.
Like a vinyl record rather than
It's vinyl records.
so that's
instead
what
of
I was
going
going to
back
get to.
CDs.
Essentially, I mean, what did it all start with? The Edison cylinder, right? That was the very first format that you could transfer sound through, and then we had the wires that you would put a sound on. I mean, vinyl records, which, for the record, is it's not a vinyl, it's a vinyl record. But anyway, a vinyl record, I mean, they were made from shellac at first, but that was that was like the first time you could listen to the music like on your own at your home anytime you want on a device, right? Before that, it was either live music or it was going to something very
Radio.
expensive, like radio. Exactly, you would be
radio.
listening to it through radio. So that was the first time you could do that, and then skipping over a few years, only a few years of music history of moving to cassette electromagnetic tapes, and then 6-track, and then the cassette tapes, and then CDs, and then all that. In my opinion, the life cycle of a format is always that you go through these different physical medias where you reach a point where you have a very, very good best format physical media. What is that right now? Blu-ray, right? And then once digital comes over, those physical medias go away, and then some old format comes back and has a resurgence as a retro format. So we see that, like you said, with vinyl records and cassette tapes actually kind of becoming retro, which makes me feel old.
Cassette tapes, the thing with cassette tapes is, and I read something about this the other day, and I apologize, I don't have reference to the article right now, but it was basically saying that the people who had started the, let's get back to cassette tapes are now at the point where, no, this is a waste. Because it's a ton of plastic. They're not as reliable as records. they get jammed, or the tape comes out and it's the harder to port, and it's just like, if you want something portable, go digital. If you want to listen to it at home, just use a record player.
Yeah.
And it's like, we've all just kind of agreed that like cassettes and CDs just aren't worth it, which I just think is really interesting. But anyway, if so, you've got that kind of happening with music and television and movies, and everybody kind of going back to what physical media do we prefer for these things. And kind of the same thing is starting to happen with games too. You had on PC, games always came on CDs. And now people don't even have CD players in their computers anymore.
Well, I mean,
because it's been Steam for the last decade for games.
If I may show my age for a minute, there was a time, actually, this is older than me. I don't know what I'm on about, but there was a time when games came on cassette. If you don't know about that, I'm about to blow your mind.
And floppies.
Yeah, I mean, floppy disks, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The 3.5-inch floppies, and before that, the other ones. But yeah, some games came on a cassette, and you would play that cassette. It sounded horrible because it contained data, not audio, or data in form of audio. And then that would load it into the RAM, and then you could play it on like on a what was the name of the computers that would play it? I don't remember. But like Apple IIs, Commodores, thank you. Commodore 64, you would play that into that and then load it. So yeah, but to move forward, like we were talking about magazines as well. Some of these magazines had CDs in them. You would get shareware CDs inside of them, where you had demos of games. You could play like the first few levels of a game. Was So yeah, just to move forward a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we were in an age where CDs were a thing. And then honestly, I think the website or the service to kill it all or show us such a convenience that we would not want to deal with any physical media has been Steam. And I would say that I'm glad it's Steam. It could have been a company like Netflix.
Really?
Because I like Steam a lot more than a lot of other companies who are also selling me digital content. Like, I prefer Steam over like the Xbox's app, or I prefer Steam over EA's app or Ubisoft's app. I think it's a lot more open and free, both to developers and a lot of the indies couldn't have happened if it wasn't for the leniency of Steam just allowing you to pick whatever game you want.
That's true. I don't know if I'd say I'm glad it's Valve. But I mean, I'd be curious what the alternatives could have been. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know if we're ever going to get back to the point where people are buying physical for PC, unfortunately. Yeah. Because computers just in general, like I said, just don't work that way. They don't come with disk drives anymore. You have to, if they do, they're a hell of a lot more expensive, and it's not really worth it for people.
Yeah, it's not worth an optical drive.
But I did see something really interesting. There's an indie gaming coalition called the Society of Play. And I've seen them at a couple events now, and I've actually kind of part of them. I haven't really been as active as I'd like. But they have this really cool thing that they do called Zets. And they're selling the indie games of the people in the group on thumb drives inside a cassette tape like case. So you have like the physical case with the artwork, you open it up, it has a thumb drive inside, and the thumb drive has the game you can install on your computer and play it. And that, I think, is clever as hell.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we didn't have a publishing deal with Sunnyside, I probably would have gone that route, because it's really clever. Because all computers have thumb drives. That's not something you're ever going to get away with.
No.
Or get away from. So that, I think, is clever. And I could see that becoming a thing if enough people caught on. It's a really cool way for indie games to publish themselves and try to sell their games and stuff. So maybe that'll become a thing someday. I don't know if we'll ever go back to the CDs or anything like that.
Yeah, I'd love to see a website where you can buy these kind of collectible, maybe in different shapes and forms. That'll be such a good idea.
Really
just
cool.
to put a little flash drive in there.
Yeah, especially because flash drives, you can get pretty creative with how they look. Yeah. And that could be a really cool...
And you can put
maybe
them in
that'll be a thing. But it's, as far as on like PlayStation, Xbox, Switch. I don't know. It looks like they're starting to go full digital. PlayStation had the option where you could buy the PS5 with the disc drive or without, and I think in a way that was them testing the waters.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the portables such as the Steam Deck.
Yeah,
that is just entirely digital, no cartridge or anything, and it will be interesting to see what Nintendo does with their.
I'm really curious with
console.
whatever the next, whatever the next Switch is going to be.
Switch 2, yeah.
But I think, and I wonder if are they reacting to the, what's the word? Are they reacting to the market, or is the market reacting to them? We just had a console port come out for Sunnyside, and it was only available physically on PS5, and that was the decision of the publisher, because the general consensus was just people don't buy physical versions of Xbox games. And it's kind of like, well, who came to that consensus? And is that like, are we going that way? Or are we just going to stop publishing games physically on consoles? And if that's the case, we start getting back to those conversations about game ownership and who actually owns it and who has the rights to it and all that stuff. Because it used to be, you look at Nintendo, if you and your friends both had a Nintendo 64, you could just share the cartridge back and forth, and you'd bring it to school and give it to your buddy, and they'd play it and finish it and whatever. And like you said, your friends would bring a game over to your mom's house so your mom could, play and you can't do that with digital stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting. I mean, I personally hope that we go back the way that all media has, like we've talked about, where the physical becomes the collector's items and people enjoy it.
Yeah,
but
I think
I hope
that's
that
the
happens
most,
with video games.
Yeah, I think that's the most kind of I guess it's a feature that I can see. It's really the only form of feature that I can see both existing at the same time. But we are going to talk about that more in the extended version of the podcast.
Yep.
We're also going
I'm going to finish eating my strawberries.
I'm going to sprinkle some history as to the video formats of the past and how Netflix even became a thing. But we're going to we're going to talk about that in the extended version of the episode, which if you like to, you can support us on Patreon for.
Yeah, but before we get there, I want to tell everybody we're going to link below. Rainy's going to, don't forget, this article about the history of video game magazines. He's going to put it down there because it's good. It's very interesting, and it talks about how gaming magazines came about and where they've been, and now they're dying. It was written in 2020, so it's a little old, but it's still really good. And crap, I was going to say something else and I forgot what it was. Go read the article. It's interesting.
And if I may for a second, Sunnyside is now out on Xbox and PlayStation. So if you've been waiting to play the game on console, you can do so now. Just search it on PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store, and you should be able to play it. PS5,
PlayStation 5,
Xbox
and
Series
Xbox SXX.
Yeah.
Just avoid confusion.
And we'll see you next week on How to Indie. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, guys.